Well, Eddie Van Halen was the second most innovative guitarist, modern guitarist. I mean, you could say maybe the third if you count Les Paul. Eddie Van Halen, there's a bunch of great guitar players, but you had Jimi Hendrix, who changed the game completely. And then nobody else really changed the game. They were great, Clapton, Jimmy Page, they changed the game. They were amazing, and they're legends. We all loved them growing up. But then Eddie Van Halen came, and he changed. He was the most innovative guitarist that you ever heard. And I remember sitting at my dad's house. I was in junior high school in Oceanside, California, and we would listen to the radio station in LA, KMET, and a song came on, and we were all like, what is that? We all thought, is that a synthesizer guitar? We'd never heard anything like it. And it was Ed Van Halen. And after that, every guitar player changed the way they thought about guitar and the way they played guitar.
And it sounds like he had a giant impression on you. Did he, in fact, change the way you play guitar?
Oh, absolutely. I worshiped him. He made me, I was so inspired by everything he did. And back then, you didn't have the internet, so it was really hard to find anything out. And so I remember my girlfriend in Oceanside at El Camino High School, Judy Carpenter, surprised me with tickets to see Van Halen at the San Diego Sports Arena. And, we were sitting a mile away. And it was just like, oh. And, years later, I would be backstage with him at the San Diego Sports Arena hanging out and having cocktails. But, when I was a kid, there was nothing like it. Nobody could touch him. He was the king.
And we touched on, some of the, big giant names that you've been associated with and played and toured with. But tell us about your encounters with Eddie Van Halen and your friendship.
Well, with Ed, I worshiped him. And one day I finally got my first big break. I left San Diego in 1985 for Los Angeles. And by 1988, I was playing football stadiums with Rod Stewart. So I got really lucky. And it was like a big deal at home in San Diego. Like, wow, I'm playing with Rod Stewart. So at the time, Rod Stewart was a superstar. And I got invited to go see Eddie at the Monsters of Rock at the Denver Stadium. So I was backstage hanging out. And then I got invited to meet Ed for cocktails at a private club after the show, which I was dying. I'm going to meet my hero for the first time. I was dying. I sit at his table. He buys me a drink. I say to him, Eddie, I grew up in San Diego. I worshiped you as a guitar player. I started playing guitar. And he goes, stop. You're making me feel like an old man. Shut up. And then we continued on having normal conversations. And over the years, we would see each other. I'd come see him in concert, and we'd hang out. And he was always so sweet. He was a real kind, gentle soul. And then years later, maybe before I did Mick Jagger, but somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were actually going on double dates. He was single, and I and my girlfriend at the time, and he was dating this girl. We would go to dinner in LA and have double dates. And he was, he was just the sweetest, kindest guy. He was out of his mind. But nobody that plays with that kind of genius and that kind of thought is a normal person. He thinks in a whole nother level. I mean, kind of out of his mind. Like one time I couldn't find him in front of a restaurant in LA, and he was up in the tree, climbed a tree. It's like, Eddie, get down. So he was a unique, incredible, innovative person. He was not your normal, he wasn't a poser, and he wasn't like trying to pretend to be an artist. He was truly genius.
And well, people obviously saw him in the videos and and all of that. What would you give other people, his fans and San Diego music lovers, something that represents him just as a person that you walked away with?
If you see, there's a million photos from the 70s all the way till now, and he has this smile. He has this dazzling smile with a twinkle in his eye. And that's not like like an actor who's understands exactly how to do that smile in the camera every time. Ed's had this twinkle that would come out of this smile. It was just the charminess. You'd see it in his eyes, you see it in his teeth, and that's truly who he was. He was a gentle soul. And I didn't know him that well. But I don't know who it really does when you really get to know, people. I just knew that every time I was with him, he was fun, but he was really a genuine, magical person, and I will miss him, and he will be missed. There hasn't been anybody like him since.
And yourself being a world-respected guitar player, you touched at first on where he'll be remembered in the place of guitar players. Can you expand on that a little bit more? You know, where he stands.
I believe Edward Van Halen, there's Jimi Hendrix, and there's Edward Van Halen, and there's everybody else. And I'm talking about the greats, not myself, but the greats. We'll always think about Jimmy Page. We'll always think about Eric Clapton. They called him God. You know, we'll think about Pete Townsend. We'll think about all those amazing guys, but none of them were Edward, and none of them were Jimi Hendrix. And those two are the Mount Rushmore, along with probably Les Paul, as the most innovative guitarist of all times. And I mean, there's nobody can touch him. I mean, I toured with Joe Satriani for 6 or 8 months in 1990 on my first solo tour. And Joe and Steve Vai, who's a dear friend of mine, they're super amazing. And Steve Vai is super innovative, and Joe's super amazing and consistent. But they all came from the germ of what Edward was doing, right? There's something about Ed doing that. And people would say, like, Rick Derringer did the hammer-ons first and stuff like that, but they didn't do it to the extent where Edward turned it into compositions. You know, it was like Mozart or something on electric guitar. I know that sounds a little corny and dramatic, but it's true. When I was a kid and I heard Eruption, it stopped me dead in my tracks. Like, what is that? You know, you never heard anything like that ever. And after that, it became the norm. He changed the world.
Yeah. And I think, you know, just countless people who his lives touched, and great moments that he's left them with. Just, you know, I think it's just news of that today, of his death, of Eddie Van Halen, due to cancer. And I think, as you know, as the night settles on here, a lot more memories will come forward.
Yeah, I'm seeing already on Instagram and Facebook, all my rock star buddies are posting about him. He impacted every musician I know. And you could be the biggest punk rocker and hate anything to do with rock, but you loved him. He brought he had a punk rock energy. Those first few Van Halen albums had a punk rock energy to them, an aggressiveness to it that wasn't aggressive like Metallica. It was aggressive like funk. Like, Eddie was a real funky guitar player too, you know. The thing that made them amazing was all the girls could dance to the first couple Van Halen albums, right? So when you'd go to a Van Halen concert, it was loaded with girls, and it was because they could dance to that stuff. It wasn't like bonehead rock. I'm sure the lyrics weren't the best, and first David's lyrics were super funny, and then Sam's lyrics were a little bit more, you know, Sammy style, the super love song style. And I knew, you know, Eddie and David I got asked to play guitar for both of them, actually, ironically. Earlier on, when Steve Vai quit David, he called me. And then later on, 3 days after they fired Sammy called me. And I actually went as far as going up to Sammy's house and writing with him. And Sammy and I have jammed a million times in, you know, Cabo and places, and we're old pals. But nobody could take his place. And if I would have taken one of those gigs, I would have had to practice for hours. I could play that stuff when I was 15 in my parents' bedroom, in my bedroom at my parents' house, because I sit there for 3 hours a day, like, you know. And there was a great guitar player in San Diego. There were several great ones. You know, Jakey Lee could do that stuff, and he went on to become very famous. And then there was another guitar player in San Diego called Luke Albano in a band called Neptune in Cardiff. And he was my god, and he was the first guy I saw that figured out how to play Eruption, because to me I couldn't even figure out what he was doing. You know, there was no YouTube. But then Luke figured it out, and then I started working on it at 16 years old, and you know, so he changed the world. Edward changed the world, and I don't know how anyone's ever going to change it like he did or Jimmy did, because everything seems to have been done now.